Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today's question was suggested by a viewer. Thanks to David for this one. No relation. Amy attacks Nick with Tinybones the Pickpocket, and it deals damage to him. Amy does not have any mana untapped, but can she target a grizzly bear's Nick's graveyard with Tinybones' ability and just choose not to cast it? Would that count as committing a crime? Okay, so the use of the word whenever on Tinybones lets us know that we're dealing with a triggered ability. Now, with triggered abilities, there are three important times to keep in mind: when they trigger, when they are put on the stack, and when they resolve. To answer this question, we'll need to carefully consider how this ability functions and understand which parts happen at which times. So Tinybones' ability triggers when it deals damage to Nick, and it gets put onto the stack pretty much immediately afterwards. There's nothing interesting going on in this scenario between those two times, but if you look at my Triggered Abilities playlist, there are a lot of examples where that difference is important. So after an ability triggers, then the time comes to go onto the stack, and there's an official procedure for how that happens. If you're familiar with the process for casting a spell, it's basically the same process, just with some technical differences stemming from the fact that a triggered ability is not represented by a card the way a spell usually is. For our purposes, the important part of the process of putting this ability onto the stack is the point where you declare targets. If you're trying to put a triggered ability on the stack, but you are unable to choose a set of legal targets for it, for example, if there was a ground seal or if Nick just didn't have any cards of the appropriate type in his graveyard, then the process fails. Since it's not possible to put that ability on the stack in a legal way, the game just goes on without it. On the other hand, if it is possible to choose a set of legal targets, then that's what happens. Because Amy chose a card in Nick's graveyard as a target of this ability, she is considered to have committed a crime. Any abilities that might trigger when Amy commits a crime would trigger at this point. Because of how the stack works, those abilities would actually go on to resolve before the Tinybones ability does. Now, in case anybody is wondering how the May and Tinybones ability functions, the stuff that I talked about happens every time the Tinybones deals damage. So you always target a card in your opponent's graveyard if that's possible. The decision of whether or not to play the card that you targeted gets made when the Tinybones ability resolves. It's even possible that you might target a card and then some third party might like your choice enough that they donate you some mana with a Spectral Searchlight or something to help you cast it. Let's close out with a challenge question to test your understanding. This one is straight out of the Judge Vault. We'll say that Amy plays a Deputy of Acquittals while her only other creature is a Phantasmal Bear. Can Amy decline to use the Deputy's ability so that she doesn't have to sacrifice her bear? And the answer is that this does not work. The part where you decide whether to return the targeted creature is made as the ability resolves, but the part where you choose the targets happens as that ability is put onto the stack. While returning the creature is optional, targeting one is not. If there is a legal target, you have to choose it, even if you don't want to. In the same way, if Wizards were to release some new mechanic that gave your creatures a buff as long as you hadn't committed a crime, it probably wouldn't synergize very well with Tinybones, because that basically forces you to commit a crime anytime it deals combat damage, which I guess is a pretty good flavor win. That's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling. Until then, I hope you have a great day.